Welcome, everyone, to the Michigan Association of Secondary School Principals podcast series, featuring great discussions, insight, and resources on all things related to education and administration. Welcome back, everyone, to Season 5 of the MASSP podcast. My name is Ryan Casey, and I'm excited to be continuing part of our conversation from our last podcast episode when we were joined by some of our friends at MCAN, or the Michigan College Access Network. We were able to talk about some of the College Advising Corps programs going on, and today we are joined by special guest Ryan Fewins-Bliss, who is the Executive Director of MCAN. Ryan, thank you so much for being with me today. How you doing?
Great. From one Ryan to another. Happy to be here.
Awesome. You know, it's funny. I actually recorded a podcast a couple months ago with Jason Schrock of Howell High School and Jason Reineke of West Ottawa. We were talking about social media and the impact on school culture. And we had two Jasons together on the podcast, which was kind of tricky as the host trying to segue questions. So now we have two Ryans, but at least you're the only one that's going to be answering. So it should be a little easier than the last one I did. But I want to go ahead and just jump right in.
Flag me if you end up talking to yourself.
That's right. Yep, exactly. So we know, Ryan, that it's been a crazy year for students, teachers, counselors, parents, administrators, and not just in the state of Michigan, obviously, across the country. So when we are looking at upperclassmen, juniors, or seniors, those that are really looking to continue their education at college, so college-bound students, what has been the impact that you have noticed in terms of enrollment numbers, or what are you hearing from your college advisors that are out in the field for those students that kind of got caught up in this COVID school year, whether from the end of last year to this year?
Well, I bring news that won't be a surprise to anybody listening to this, since your folks are in the thick of it. We've got a crisis on our hands for enrollment in post-secondary education in Michigan, really across the country, but in Michigan it's tremendous. I'm trying to wave the red flag far and wide to let folks know that we've got a COVID enrollment crisis. So your folks, again, know this better than anyone else. We've already got a shrinking pipeline from high school into college. We have fewer seniors over the course of the next projected decade. That's not good for our college-going behavior. That's not good for creating the talented workforce that we need. But it's the reality that we have to deal with, and that means shrinking budgets for your buildings as well. So again, your folks are well aware of this. Ultimately, we have seen enrollment across the state drop every year for the last couple of years, a small percent. So I think last year was like 1.2, 1.3%. This year for COVID nationwide, we've seen a negative 2.5% loss across the entire United States. That doesn't sound like much, but if you think about it, it's doubling the loss that we had in 2019, which was already itself a loss. So it's a loss on top of a loss. In Michigan specifically, we lost about 9.2% of our enrollment between fall of 19 and fall of 2020. And this is all students, right? All students, all types of institutions. That's devastating. That's existential for some institutions. When you look at the 50 states, we were 49th in loss, or second in loss, depending on how you want to rank it. The only state that was worse than us was New Mexico. If you remember, I just said we were negative 9.2. New Mexico is negative 9.3. So we weren't too far away from the very bottom. That's really, really bad news. So as I mentioned, the Midwest has been hit really hard. Michigan, as part of the Midwest, was hit the worst. So those numbers are rough and they're bad. But when you start to unpackage the numbers around new students, so this is students that we call freshmen, but they might be adults who are freshmen, right? First time in college, new students to the institution. Institutions see them as sustainable revenue over time, and we see them as the beginning of the college-going process. So obviously, it's really important to have a lot of new students coming into the institution. Nationwide, we lost 13.1% of new students. And when you start to dig down into those numbers even farther, we lost over 8% at four-year publics, more than 10% at four-year privates, negative 21% at community colleges across the country, 21%. I mean, that's devastating. The only place where we saw growth was in for-profit institutions. And I try not to paint with a wide brush. I don't mean to say all for-profit institutions are bad, but we have seen predatory recruitment from these types of institutions, specifically around veterans who have the new GI Bill, and students of color and low-income students who have full Pell, really attracted to that federal funds, those federal funds coming into the institution. Again, to be clear, not all for-profits are doing that, but we really encourage students to be savvy shoppers. So that's a lot of data, Ryan, that I threw at you, but it is really, really ugly. I'm sure your folks can close their eyes and picture what the data looks like when you disaggregate by race and income. It's really, really bad. So we're seeing, 20+% loss, depending on the type of institution, with Black students and Hispanic students, and frankly, male students and Native American students have been hit some of the worst. So again, none of this is new information to your folks. They're seeing it every single day. But I'm trying to raise the red flag for legislators and businesses and other folks who care about the future of Michigan and care about the economic recovery post-COVID. This is the stuff that matters, and this is really the last on anybody's mind right now.
Wow, those numbers are just crazy. I did not expect some of those numbers to be that high. Is there any way to try and identify why Michigan would have been towards the bottom of that list? I know you mentioned the Midwest, kind of as a whole is on the lower end, but that just seems so shocking because it seems like we were at least heading in the right direction. And then you expect a little bit of loss, just like in every state probably, but to be all the way 49th or maybe even 50th just seems very alarming.
Yeah, I mean, I've got some theories. So this is, unscientific Ryan's opinion on this. So take it for what it's worth. But I think Governor Whitmer shut us down stronger than most other states. Frankly, Midwest states shut down more strongly than most other states. Ultimately, I think that was good and the right thing and valued safety over, money and people's lives. But ultimately, that left people wondering, is my college going to be open? Is it going to be in person? Is it going to be virtual? Are they going to charge me full tuition? And institutions just weren't able to respond quick enough to students and families because they didn't know either. They didn't know day to day whether we were going to open up. And then when you think about it regionally, Northern Michigan University and Marquette was under different rules than Wayne State University and Detroit. So each institution is trying to navigate it alone. So a lot of confusion at the institution level, leading to confusion at the student and family level. So I think that played a really large part in that. Folks really need clarity. Folks need to know what to expect. They're making a large investment. I mean, you're thinking, investing $10, $20, $30,000 a year in something. You want to know what you're getting for that money, and you want to know that your students are going to be safe and that this is going to pay off in the long run. So I think there was a lot of confusion around the shutdown issues. And then second to that, and related to that, Michigan doesn't have a higher education system. So each institution is governed by its own board. That offers a lot of local control in Michigan, which is a plus. But when it comes to responding to something like a pandemic, in other states, they have a system who can snap their fingers and say, system-wide, here are the decisions. System-wide, here is what we're going to do. System-wide, we're going to communicate to students and families. In Michigan, it's Central Michigan University communicating to people. It's Lansing Community College, communicating to people. It's Albion College. It's, Saginaw Chippewa Tribal College. Each is trying to figure out what they're going to do themselves and then communicate it to not just students and faculty and staff, but potential students coming in. That's been really hard.
That just makes a lot of sense to me, just what you described. I mean, I can easily foresee those being two legitimate reasons why those numbers would be that way. So knowing, Ryan, that these numbers are not going in the direction we want, and MASSP has been fortunate to work with MCAN, your organization, on a lot of different projects. So what are some of the different programs or things you guys are trying to do to combat the enrollment crisis?
We've come together with the public institutions, the community colleges, the independent institutions, and other groups across the state to form what we call the Rapid Response Enrollment Task Force. Because there isn't this statewide level of coordination, we're trying to provide some of that where appropriate. To be clear, we're not part of the state government. We don't have the budget or the authority of the state government, so we're not replacing that like other states have, but we're trying to rally the troops together to be able to make some decisions collectively. Ultimately, I have appreciated that the institutions have somewhat thrown away their competitiveness right now because they know they're all in really, really dire straits. So they're working really well together to make sure more students in Michigan, adults in high school, students who are graduating, will go into college together. So we're trying to lead that effort. We're working with high schools across the state to gather their student directory level information. Because most students didn't take the SAT in spring of 2020, College Board, who runs the SAT, doesn't have the information to share with higher ed partners, which is normally how higher eds get a lot of their information to recruit students. Because students didn't take that test, there's no information for higher eds to get. So now higher eds are looking for help. They also can't physically come into most school buildings, and students can't physically come on their campus for tours. So all of the bullets in their gun, if you will, that they have used for recruitment and admissions over the years have been taken away. So we're trying to help them be able to reach students. So we've been asking high schools for their directory level information to share with the higher eds across the state for the sole purpose of recruiting students for college. I've been really impressed with your members and the buildings who have shared their data with us. I know it's sort of a leap of faith to send all of your students' data to this third party, hoping that they're trustworthy. I appreciate that your buildings have put and your principals have put their trust in us to do that. We have about 72,000 student names of juniors and seniors across the state. Almost 300 schools have responded. If you're hearing this and you haven't responded or haven't seen our email, please reach out to us. We want your student data to use in wholly appropriate, good ways for your students to benefit long-term. But that's one thing that we're working on. We also launched a college advising hotline where students, parents, family members, school counselors could call in and seek advice about the college going behaviors that need to happen in normal times, but also in COVID times. So anyone across the state can call and get some advice from our trained college advisors and college coaches on how to do that. We also offered some COVID response grants to institutions and schools back in probably April to September of 2020. We knew that folks were going to need to pivot what they were doing quickly around decision days and graduations and summer melt and enrollment and all of those things that matter, all of the things that we measure the health of post-secondary access in Michigan. We knew they'd need some help, so we offered COVID response grants. We didn't budget for it because we didn't know there was going to be a pandemic, but ultimately at the end of the day, we moved $625,000 into the field, into high school buildings, into colleges and community-based organizations, and we did it in a quick way. So we shaved down our application, we shaved down our review time, we shaved down our reporting to be able to move the money to be able to support students and families as quickly as possible. So I'm really proud of our team for being able to turn around that. We probably will launch COVID response grants again sometime here in the next couple of months, knowing that there's still more work to be done and schools and institutions and community-based organizations still need some help. So that's some of the ways that we've been trying to help at MCAN. The latest thing is just, as I mentioned, waving this big red flag to let people know that there's a crisis so that folks know we need to change our behaviors, change our policies, change our funding models. Just 2 hours before we're recording this podcast, I was on a call with a state representative pitching this same issue, that we're in a crisis and we need to invest in our institutions, which ultimately will be an investment in our students and our economy.
Awesome. So if I'm an administrator listening to this right now, or really any other educator, what can they simply do to help assist with the enrollment crisis issue as well?
Double down on talking to your students about going to college. I know your folks are already doing this. We love working with your members. They already see that their goals and their responsibilities are not just ending at graduation of high school, but pushing people into a post-secondary pathway. Right now, a lot of schools, and again, your members know this better than I do, are talking about social, emotional health and mental health, and obviously school safety. And are we open? Are we closed? Are we virtual? Are we in person? All of those things. Those are critical. Everyone should be focusing on those things. But what I'm hoping your buildings and your members will also do is double down in the college going behaviors. We still need students to fill out FAFSAs. We still need them to apply for college. Again, if you haven't shared your data with us, we're asking you to do that. If your school board has a policy that says you won't share data like this, we have an opt-in survey where you can send out the link to students and they could opt in to be recruited. They could give us their information on their own behalf and say, please recruit me. We've got a link. We've got about 1,500 responses to that already. Happy to share that information as well. But really trying to bring back some sense of normalcy to the school year, like I know, again, your folks are already doing, but that college going behaviors as part of that senior year and part of that junior year, continuing to do those things and making sure students are thinking about what's coming next. Because what will ultimately come next is hopefully an economic recovery of the state. And what happened in 2010 after the recession that happened, the Great Recession, we saw 11.3 million new jobs created between 2010 and 2016 in the country. Only 80,000 of those 11.3 million jobs went to people with a high school diploma or below. All of the other jobs, so that's like 11.2 something million jobs, went to people who had certificates or degrees. So I suspect coming out of this next economic downturn, it's going to be the same, if not even worse, so to speak, or more important that you have some sort of education after high school. Your personal economics will need you to do that, but also the state's economics will need you to do that.
Wow, that's a really good point too. That's a crazy number. I did not know that. So, Ryan, I just want to say thank you so much for your time and all the work that MCAN does. I know as a former principal, I always appreciated all the opportunities that my school is able to get from different programs and initiatives that you offered. And I'm sure that the way you are combating the enrollment crisis is no different. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day, talking to other representatives and legislators to try and let them know about what's going on with college enrollment in Michigan. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks to your members for taking our calls and reading our emails. I know it's sometimes hard to realize that we're not one of those vendors trying to get your folks' attention and trying to take money out of the districts and buildings. We're actually your friendly nonprofit that doesn't charge for anything and trying to invest in your buildings. So it's great to have the attention of your members.
Awesome. And thank you for listening, everybody. Remember, you can access this podcast episode and more by going to MASSP.com, as well as the Apple Podcast Store and all other places podcasts can be found. If you want to learn more about MCAN or you want to follow them on social media, I know a great way is on Twitter through the handle @MCAN. So that's @MCAN. Thanks for listening, everybody, and have a great day.